The mining colony was always cold at night. The wind carried dust and smoke through the broken streets. Old machines hummed in the distance, and the lamps flickered like dying stars. Life here was hard, and no one cared about anyone else. Every man and woman worked only to survive another day. In the corner of this forgotten colony lived Daniel, a human miner. He was not young anymore. His hands were rough from years of work, and his back ached from carrying heavy tools. He lived alone in a small metal hut, where silence was his only company. Most nights he ate simple food-stale bread, boiled roots, or thin soup. It was not much, but it kept him alive that night as he walked back from the mines. He carried a small bag of food. The streets were empty, shadows stretching under the pale light of broken lamps. But then he heard something. It was faint, almost lost in the wind, a sound like soft breathing mixed with fear. Daniel slowed his steps, his instincts telling him he was not alone, behind a pile of scrap metal. Two small figures crouched. At first, he thought they were thieves, waiting to grab his food. But when his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he froze. They were children, not human children, but alien girls, thin, dirty, and trembling. Their skin glowed faintly in the dark, a pale shimmer like moonlight. Their large eyes stared at him, filled with hunger and something else, something heavy and silent. For a long moment, none of them moved. Daniel held his bag tightly, his stomach reminding him that he had worked all day and earned this food. But then he looked closer at the girls. They looked no older than 10 or 11. Their clothes were torn rags, and their arms were covered with dust. One of them clutched the other's hand, protecting her like a sister. They did not beg. They did not speak. They only watched him with wide, empty eyes. Daniel sighed. He could have walked away, like everyone else in this colony would have done. Here, kindness was weakness, and weakness meant death. But something inside him refused to leave. Maybe it was the memory of his own childhood, when he too had gone hungry. Or maybe it was just the simple truth: no one should starve. Not even strangers, not even aliens. He stepped closer. The girls stiffened, ready to run. Slowly, Daniel opened his bag and took out the small pot of warm soup he had carried from the canteen. It was thin and watery, but it smelled of herbs and salt. He crouched and placed it on the ground. "Eat," he said softly, his voice rough but not unkind. The girls did not move at first. Their eyes flicked from the pot to his face. Searching for a trap, Daniel stayed still, waiting. Finally, the older girl pushed the younger one forward. Whispering something in a strange tongue, the smaller girl crawled closer, her little hands shaking. She dipped her fingers into the soup and brought them to her mouth. Her eyes widened, the warmth spread through her. She leaned forward and began to eat quickly. Almost desperately, the older sister joined her, their hunger stronger than their fear. Daniel watched silently. Each spoonful they took felt like a knife in his own stomach. For he would go hungry tonight, but somehow he did not regret it. There was a strange peace in watching them eat. The younger one coughed, spilling a bit of soup. And the older wiped her mouth gently. Even in their weakness, they cared for each other. When the pot was empty, the girls sat back, their eyes shining brighter now. The younger one whispered a soft thank you in broken human words. The older girl did not speak, but her gaze was strong and steady. She looked at Daniel as if memorizing his face, as if this moment meant more than just a meal. The wind howled outside the scrapyard, but for a brief moment, the cold did not matter. Daniel stood, brushing the dust from his knees. "Stay warm," he muttered, though he knew they had no blankets, no shelter, nothing. Still, the words left his mouth like a promise he could not explain. As he turned to leave, he felt their eyes on his back. The older one spoke then, her voice clear though quiet. "One day," she said in halting words, "we Return. Daniel stopped, confused. He looked over his shoulder. But the girls had already moved deeper into the shadows. Their glowing eyes were the last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed them. He shook his head and walked home, telling himself it was only childish talk. But deep inside, something in her voice stayed with him. It was not a request, not a hope. It had sounded like a promise, and though he did not know it then, that small act of kindness would follow him across years, across stars, waiting for the day when strangers would return. The next morning came slowly. Gray clouds hung heavy over the colony, and the ground was wet from a thin night rain. Daniel woke early, as always, his body aching from years of labor. He stirred the last bit of dry bread into hot water, making a poor man's breakfast. The soup from last night was gone, given to strangers. And his stomach still complained. For a moment, he wondered if he had imagined it all. Had there really been two alien girls hiding in the junkyard, their eyes glowing like stars? Or had it been some tired dream from a hungry man's mind? But when he stepped outside, he saw small footprints in the wet dirt. Leading away from his hut, he knew then it had been real. Daniel followed the prints a short distance, but they vanished near the main street. The colony was already alive with noise miners heading to work, traders shouting their prices, machines rumbling. He searched the faces around him, but he did not see the two girls anywhere. It was as if they had melted into the shadows of the colony. Still, he could not forget the way the older one had spoken, her words broken yet firm. One day, we return. All day long, those words echoed in his head. He tried to push them aside as he worked, hammering at stone and pulling heavy carts. But each strike of his tool brought back the memory of their eyes, hungry, yet filled with something deeper. It unsettled him, because it was not just gratitude, it had been promise. That evening, as Daniel sat by his fire, the silence pressed hard against him. He remembered how the smaller girl had coughed, spilling soup, and how the older one had gently wiped her face. That image stayed in his mind longer than the hunger in his own belly. He wondered where they slept now, if they had found food again, if they even survived another night. Days passed, then weeks. Daniel never saw them again. He searched, sometimes, quietly, while pretending to shop at the market or while walking back from the mines. But there were no glowing eyes in the shadows, no small voices whispering in the dust. It was as if the colony had swallowed them whole. The people around him noticed nothing. No one cared about two starving children. Alien or not, to the colony, they were nothing more than lost ghosts. But Daniel could not forget. He had seen their faces, felt their hunger, and given them warmth. And though he told himself it was nothing, deep down, he knew had changed him. One night, as the cold crept through the thin walls of his hut, he dreamed. In the dream, he saw the two girls again. But older, taller, their eyes brighter than before. They stood on a hill of metal, looking down at him. The older one spoke, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. "You gave us life, human," she said, "and we will not forget." Daniel woke with a start. Sweat on his forehead, the fire had burned low, and his hut smelled of smoke. He sat up, staring into the fading flames. He told himself it was only a dream, but he could not shake the feeling that it was more than that. It felt like a message, a thread connecting him to something larger than his small, tired life. As the years rolled forward, Daniel kept working. He grew older, his back bent further. His hair turned gray at the edges, but he never forgot. Every time he passed the junkyard, he looked into the shadows, half expecting to see them waiting every night when he sat to eat his small meals. He remembered the way their eyes had looked when tasting warm soup for the first time. It gave him strange comfort, though he often wondered why. 10 years. That is how long the memory lived inside him. 10 years of silence. 10 years of wondering. Most men in the colony grew bitter with age, their faces hard, their hearts closed. But Daniel, though tired and poor, held on to something fragile hope. Hope that maybe kindness was not wasted, even in a place where cruelty ruled. One evening, as he sat alone, the sky above the colony burned with the colors of sunset. He closed his eyes and remembered that voice. One day, we return. The words struck him differently now. After so many years, were they only childish talk from a starving girl? Or had she meant them with a seriousness far beyond her age? Daniel chuckled to himself, shaking his head. Foolish. He muttered, "They're long gone," and yet his heart beat faster, as if it knew something his mind refused to believe. That promise, spoken so softly in the dark, had not been forgotten, not by him, and perhaps not by them, for now, life went on as usual. The mines, the hunger, the long nights, but somewhere beyond the colony, beyond the dust and the endless stars, the future was moving toward him, and Daniel, though he did not know it yet, was waiting for a tomorrow that would change everything. The colony did not change much. The same dust storms swept through the broken streets, the same old machines groaned in the mines, and the same gray faces of tired workers filled every corner. Years passed like slow drops of water in a cracked jar, wearing down stone, wearing down people. Daniel grew older with each passing year. His shoulders bent more, his hands carried deeper scars, and his nights grew quieter. He was still a miner, still poor, still living in his small metal hut. But in his heart, something different had taken root, something he could never explain to anyone. The memory of two glowing-eyed children who had once eaten his food, then vanished into the shadows. At first, he thought about them often. He expected to see them again, perhaps in the market or near the mines. He watched the alleys at night, waiting for a familiar whisper or a flash of glowing eyes. But they never returned. The days stretched into months, the months into years, and soon they became memory too sharp to forget, yet too distant to hold. Most people in the colony would have forgotten. Here, people disappeared all the time, starved, killed, sold, or simply swallowed by the endless stars. No one kept track of strangers. But Daniel could not erase them. He remembered the smaller one coughing as she ate, her thin hands trembling. He remembered the older one's steady eyes, and the way she had said the words one day. We return. It had been 10 years now, and still. The sound of her voice sometimes echoed in his dreams. The colony changed him in other ways. Neighbors came and went, friends died, and debts grew heavier. Daniel often sat by his fire at night, staring into the flames, wondering if he had imagined everything. Maybe there had been no alien children. Maybe hunger and exhaustion had tricked him. But then he would remember the footprints in the mud, the shimmer of their skin, and the way their voices had trembled yet carried strange weight. He knew it had been real, yet reality was cruel. He told himself not to wait, not to expect anything. The girls were probably dead long ago, forgotten like countless others. Still, he held on to the memory like a small ember in the cold. Because in a world of endless dust and hardship, that ember was the only warmth left in his soul. Sometimes, Daniel wondered why he cared. Why did two children matter so much to him when thousands suffered in the colony every day? Maybe it was because he had done something different for them, something he had not done for anyone else. He had chosen to share, to give, to show kindness. And though it left him hungry that night, it had left a mark deeper than hunger. One evening, while working late in the mines, Daniel's lamp flickered, the walls groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling, and one of the tunnels collapsed nearby. Men screamed, tools clattered, and smoke filled the air. Daniel escaped, coughing and stumbling, his heart pounding with the thought that death had almost taken him. When he reached his hut that night, he sat shaking, his hands pressed to his face, and in that silence, the memory came again to alien children in the dark, eating his soup, like it was the greatest treasure in the galaxy. He laughed bitterly, then whispered, "Where are you now?" No answer came, only the cold wind. But deep inside, he felt the same thing he had felt 10 years ago, that strange weight in the air when the older girl had spoken. It had not been a request, not even hope. It had been promise, and promise had power, even if it took a lifetime to see it. The years made Daniel lonelier. He never married, never had children, never left the colony. His life was small, ordinary, and invisible to the universe. But sometimes, when the stars shone bright above the black sky, he would stare upward and imagine that somewhere out there, those two children had survived, grown, and remembered. He did not dare to believe it fully, yet the thought was enough to keep him alive. Neighbors whispered about him sometimes, calling him strange, a dreamer, a man who wasted his time staring at nothing. But Daniel did not care. He had nothing but his work and his memories. And the memory of that night was stronger than all his hunger and pain. 10 years it had been 10 long years of silence. No footsteps at his door, no glowing eyes in the dark, no sign that his kindness had ever mattered. And yet, as Daniel sat by his fire one last time before sleep, the memory stirred again. One day, "We return." He closed his eyes, his body aching, his mind heavy with age, and though he did not know it, those words were closer to truth than he ever imagined. Because sometimes promises do not fade. Sometimes they travel through time and space, waiting for the right moment to appear. And Daniel's tomorrow was already on its way. The morning began like every other day in the colony. The air was heavy with dust, the streets filled with the sound of coughing workers, and the endless hum of machines rose from the mines. Daniel woke early, his bones aching as usual, and he stretched before lighting a small fire. He boiled water, dropped in a few roots, and called it breakfast. 10 years of the same routine. 10 years of survival, 10 years of silence. He no longer expected change. Hope had become a memory. Like the forgotten laughter of childhood, still, sometimes his mind wandered to the past. The night of the hungry strangers, the promise whispered in the dark. One day, "We return." The words lingered even now, a thread tied to his heart. But Daniel had learned long ago not to wait for miracles. Life in the colony was simple work. Eat, sleep, repeat until death came. That day, Daniel walked toward the mines. With his tools slung over his shoulder, the sky was gray, filled with low clouds, and a faint vibration trembled in the air. At first, he thought it was only the machines underground, but then the vibration grew stronger until the very ground beneath his boots shook. The people in the streets stopped, turning their heads upward, and then they saw it. A shadow fell over the colony, vast and dark. The clouds split apart as a massive ship descended slowly from the sky. It was nothing like the rusty cargo haulers or the clunky mining transports they were used to. This ship gleamed with silver and gold, its surface polished like a mirror. Light ran across its hull like flowing rivers, glowing symbols written in an alien tongue. The engines rumbled with power that felt alive, shaking the air like thunder. Gasps filled the colony, children pointed, women covered their mouths, men stepped back with wide eyes. No one here had ever seen such a thing. This was no common vessel. It was a luxury ship, a craft of the powerful, the rich, the untouchable. Why would such a ship come to a forgotten dust colony like theirs? Daniel stopped in the middle of the street, frozen. The ship moved slowly, deliberately, as if searching then to his disbelief. It descended lower until it hovered above the ground not far from him. The massive hull gleamed in the weak sunlight, and the colony held its breath. The great ship had chosen to land. Dust exploded outward as its landing struts extended. The engines dimmed, the ground trembled, and silence followed. For a long moment, No one moved. The crowd of colonists stood at a distance, whispering nervously. Whose ship was this? What did it want here? Was it danger or salvation? Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to step back, to hide among the others. But then he saw the ship's great door opening slowly, light spilling from within, and the impossible happened. It did not open toward the crowd, not toward the marketplace or the officials' quarters. It opened toward him. The colonists noticed it too. All eyes turned to Daniel, confusion and suspicion in their faces. He felt their stares burning in too. Him? Why him? Why would a ship like this choose to face a poor miner, a nobody? The ramp extended with a hiss, pressing into the dirt before his boots. Daniel's throat tightened. His breath caught in his chest. He wanted to move, but his legs felt rooted. To the ground, the crowd whispered louder, some muttering in fear, others in envy. What is happening? Why him? Did he do something? The light at the end of the ramp shifted, and two figures appeared. At first, Daniel thought his eyes deceived him. They were tall, elegant, moving with a grace no miner could ever match. Their forms shone with soft light, their long cloaks flowing like liquid silver, and their faces familiar, impossibly familiar. Daniel's stomach twisted. He knew them. The memory of 10 years ago slammed into him the junkyard. The glowing eyes, the whisper of a promise. It was them, the hungry strangers. No longer children, but grown, radiant, powerful. They walked down the ramp with calm certainty. The crowd stepped back in silence, no one daring to speak. Their glowing eyes scanned the colony, but stopped when they found him. Daniel the Old. Miners standing frozen in the dirt, their faces softened. And something like joy sparked in their eyes. The older one stepped forward. Her voice carrying through the stunned colony. Human, she said. Her words clear, strong, and filled with memory. We have returned, the younger one. Now taller than Daniel himself, lowered her head respectfully. Her voice was softer, but it trembled with emotion. You gave us life when no one else would. She said, we never forgot. The crowd gasped. Daniel's hands shook as he tried to understand. The orphans, these girls had become women of power. Their very presence enough to silence a whole colony, and they had come back for him. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest. He remembered the hunger in their eyes, the warmth of that. One small meal, and now, 10 years later, here they stood. Not as helpless children, but as something greater. Their promise had not been empty. It had been real. And as the golden ship loomed behind them, Daniel realized something that made his knees weaken. His simple act of kindness on one cold night had changed his life forever. And the true meaning of their return was only just beginning to unfold. The Dubla colony had gone silent. Every eye was fixed on the golden ship, on the two radiant women standing at the bottom of the ramp. And most of all in Daniel, the old miner who suddenly seemed to be the center of the universe. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he thought his chest might burst. He could barely believe what he was seeing. 10 years ago, they had been fragile children hiding in the shadows. Thin and trembling, now they stood tall and strong. Their presence, commanding more respect than any official or guard in the colony. Their glowing eyes shone brighter, and their voices carried the weight of power. The older one stepped forward, her cloak brushing the dusty ground. Her face was sharp yet beautiful, and her eyes locked onto Daniel's with a strange softness. Do you remember us? She asked, her voice calm but filled with emotion. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came. He simply nodded, his throat dry. How could he forget? The younger one, her expression gentler, spoke next. You fed us when no one else would, she said. Her voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from something deeper memory. You gave us warmth, human, when the universe turned. "It's back on us," the crowd gasped. Whispers spread quickly. What are they talking about? He knew them. 10 years ago. Is this true? Daniel felt the weight of all those stares, but none of it mattered. He looked only at the two women before him. His mind raced with questions. Where had they gone? Who had they become? Why come back now after so many years? The older one smiled. Faintly, though her eyes were serious. "You are wondering who we are," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "You knew us only as orphans, weak and hunted, but we were not ordinary children." Daniel. She lifted her hand, and light shimmered around her fingers, forming strange, glowing symbols in the air. The crowd gasped again, stepping back in awe. Daniel stared, his chest tight. "What? What are you?" He whispered, barely able to speak. The younger one stepped closer, her long silver hair catching the light. "We are daughters of a great house," she said, her eyes lowering for a moment. "But when you found us, our family was gone. Our enemies hunted us. And we had nothing." She paused, then lifted her gaze, her voice steady. "You gave us a meal, not gold, not weapons, not promises, just food. But that kindness gave us the strength to survive, to grow, to reclaim what was ours." Daniel felt his legs weaken. He remembered their dirty faces, their shaking hands, their whispered words. And now these powerful women were the same children he had once pitied. His kindness had been nothing to him at the time, but to them had been everything. The older sister raised her hand slightly, silencing the whispers of the crowd. Her voice was steady and strong, echoing through the colony. "Humans are often called selfish, violent, and cruel," she said. "But this one, this miner, forgotten by his own kind, showed mercy when no one else would. We never forgot, and we never will." The younger sister's eyes glistened as she looked at Daniel. "We promised to return," she whispered, her lips trembling slightly. "And now we keep that promise." Daniel swallowed hard, his voice finally breaking. "Free I did nothing," he said hoarsely, shaking his head. "I only shared my food. A little soup. It was nothing." The older one stepped closer, her expression soft but unyielding. "To you, it was nothing," she said. "To us, it was life." The colony watched in stunned silence as the two alien women, clearly leaders, clearly powerful beyond measure, stood before a poor miner with bowed heads. Respect, honor, gratitude, things Daniel had never received in his entire life, were now being offered to him openly. The younger one reached into her cloak and drew out a small golden emblem. She held it out to him with both hands, her voice trembling with emotion. "This belongs to you now," she said. "It is the mark of our house, our family crest. By giving it, we bind ourselves to you. Your kindness is our honor, and your life is now tied to ours." Daniel stared at the shining emblem in her hands. He hesitated, unsure, his rough, scarred hands trembling as he reached forward. When his fingers brushed the golden crest, warmth spread through him like fire. The crowd gasped once more, some even dropping to their knees in fear or awe. Daniel's eyes widened. I don't understand," he whispered. "Why me? I'm just a miner. I'm nothing." The older one smiled faintly, shaking her head. "You are not nothing," she said. "You are the reason we are alive, and now you are part of our destiny, whether you accept it or not." The two sisters lowered themselves slightly, a gesture of respect no one in the colony had ever seen before, and as Daniel stood frozen, holding the crest of a house he did not know, one truth rang clear in his mind. The promise had been real, and the future he never expected was standing right before him. The golden crest still burned with warmth in Daniel's hands. His fingers trembled as he held it, unsure if he was even worthy to touch something so bright, so sacred. The colony around him remained frozen in silence, Every pair of eyes watching. To them, he was just a poor miner, yet here he stood, holding a symbol of power no one could even name. The older sister stepped forward, her cloak brushing the dusty ground, her glowing eyes fixed on him, filled with pride. "Daniel," she said softly, though her voice carried like a bell, "you gave us life when all others turned away. Now we return, not with empty hands, but with a gift that no measure of gold could equal." Daniel's throat tightened. He shook his head slowly, his voice hoarse. I don't deserve anything. I only gave you food. Only a little meal." The younger sister stepped closer, her silver hair shimmering in the sunlight. "To us, that meal was more than food," she said. "It was hope. It was proof that kindness still existed. It gave us the strength to endure, to fight, to rise again." Her hands lifted gently. And behind her, the great ship hummed, its surface glowing as if alive. The crowd gasped as part of the ship's hull shifted, revealing a shining doorway. Inside was a glimpse of luxury beyond imagination, polished floors of crystal, walls glowing with soft light, seats shaped from silver and silk. It was a palace built into the stars. Daniel's breath caught in his chest. He had never seen such beauty in his entire life. The older sister turned to him. "This ship is yours now," she declared. "Every corridor, every chamber, every treasure it carries belongs to you." The crowd erupted in shouts, some in awe, some in disbelief, some in envy, but Daniel barely heard them. He staggered back a step, shaking his head violently. No, this can't be real. I'm just a miner. I don't know how to fly. I don't know how to rule." The younger sister raised her hand, silencing him with a gentle gesture. "You do not need to know now," she said softly. "We will guide you. We will teach you. This gift is not a burden, it is our gratitude. Our bond, our promise fulfilled." Daniel's knees weakened. He wanted to refuse, to push it all away. How could one act of kindness be worth so much? But when he looked into their glowing eyes, he saw no doubt, no hesitation, only truth. The older sister stepped closer, her voice firm. "Do not think this is charity. This is honor. Our people remember debts across generations, and no debt is greater than the one we owe you." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest heavy. He thought of all the years he had spent in the mines, bent and broken, forgotten by the world. He thought of the nights he had gone hungry, of the laughter and warmth he had never known. And now this, a gift beyond anything he could imagine. The younger sister reached out her hand. "Come," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Step into the life you earned when you showed mercy. Leave behind the dust, the hunger, the pain. This ship will carry you where you were always meant to go." The colonists whispered furiously, their faces pale with shock. Some burned with jealousy, others with fear, but none dared to move. They had seen the power of these women, and they knew no one could challenge their decision. Daniel looked down at the crest in his hands, its golden glow pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. He thought of the night long ago, the soup, the trembling hands, the promise whispered in the dark. One day, we return, and now the promise was alive before him. His voice cracked as he finally spoke. I don't know if I can accept this," he whispered. "I am no hero, no leader. I am just a man who is tired, hungry, and foolish enough to share a meal." The older sister's lips curved into a faint smile. "And that," she said firmly, "is why you are worthy, for only those who do not seek reward deserve the greatest of them." Daniel's chest tightened, and tears stung his eyes. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. All his life, he had been invisible. But now 2 powerful women stood before him, declaring him worthy of a gift that could change his destiny. The younger sister's hand remained extended, waiting. Daniel hesitated only a moment longer. Then slowly, with a shaking breath, he placed his scarred hand into hers. Warmth spread through him instantly, a light that sank into his skin, and bones, the ship hummed louder, responding to the bond. The crowd gasped again as a beam of golden light washed over Daniel, wrapping him in a glow that made him seem taller, stronger, almost ageless. He staggered, gripping the younger sisters hand tightly. "What is happening to me?" he asked, his voice shaking. The older sister stepped forward, her eyes bright. "The ship accepts you," she said. "It knows you as its master now. You are no longer a miner of dust, Daniel. You are bound to the stars, and the stars will answer to you." The light faded slowly, leaving Daniel breathless. The sisters stood close to him, their eyes filled with warmth and loyalty. And the colony, every man, woman, and child, bowed their heads without meaning to, unable to resist the power of the moment. Daniel's life had changed forever. He had given a simple meal, and in return, he had been given the universe. But even now, deep in his chest, he wondered, why him? Why this much? And what new destiny awaited him beyond the dust and silence of the colony? The dust of the colony swirled as the golden ship hummed softly. Daniel stood at the ramp, the sisters at his side, while the entire settlement watched in silence. For years, the miners and traders had ignored him, seeing only a tired man bent by work and age. Now, their eyes followed him with awe, fear, and disbelief. The younger sister still held his hand, her grip warm and steady. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Come with us. Leave this place. The stars are waiting for you." He looked back at the crowd, faces filled with shock, envy, and whispers. For a moment, his chest tightened. This colony had been his prison for so long. The endless gray days, the hunger, the pain had been his whole world. But he realized now, it was never his home. His home was not in dust, but in the bond of kindness he had made a decade ago. The older sister stepped forward, her cloak glowing faintly. "Our people wait for us beyond the stars," she said, her voice firm and proud. "They know the story of the human miner who gave us life when all was lost. They will know your name, Daniel, and they will honor it as we do." Daniel swallowed hard. His eyes burning. "I never wanted honor," he said softly. "I only wanted to share what little I had. That is all." The older sister's expression softened. "And that is what makes you greater than kings," she replied, "for kings give because they expect loyalty. But you gave because you cared." The crowd shifted uneasily, some muttering, some bowing their heads. Even those who once mocked Daniel now stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. A few children at the front looked at him with wide eyes, as though he had become more than humans, something larger, something worth believing in. The ship's interior glowed with a welcoming light. Daniel hesitated at the ramp, staring at its shining halls. It was not fear that held him back, but disbelief. How could a poor miner truly step into such a place? But the younger sister squeezed his hand again, her eyes shimmering. "You belong with us now," she whispered. "Not because of power, not because of blood, but because of your heart." Slowly, Daniel climbed the ramp, his steps heavy, yet each one carrying him further from the life he had known. The sisters walked beside him, their presence like fire and light. Behind them, the colony shrank into shadows. The murmurs of the people faded, replaced by the hum of the ship. Inside, Daniel gasped. The halls glittered like starlight, frozen in crystal. The air smelled clean and fresh, filled with soft notes of flowers he had never known. Strange machines hummed quietly, smooth and alive, as if breathing. It was like stepping into another world, a world where suffering had no place. The sisters led him to a great chamber where a long window opened to the endless sky. Stars burned beyond the glass, thousands of them, stretching into forever. The younger sister stood at his side, her voice low. "You once gave us a view of hope, Daniel. Now we give you the view of eternity." He pressed his rough, scarred hand to the glass, staring out at the infinite stars for the first time in his life. He felt small, but not forgotten. He felt part of something greater, something vast, and in his chest, a warmth grew that no fire had ever given. The older sister placed a hand on his shoulder. "From this day forward," she said firmly, "you are part of our house. Our people will protect you, honor you, and follow your name across generations." Daniel turned to her, shaking his head slightly, his voice cracking. "Why me? Why would your people care for someone like me?" She met his gaze without hesitation, because kindness, once given, spreads further than war or wealth. "Your act was small, but its echo will live in every corner of our world. You are proof that humanity carries light even in the darkest places." Daniel closed his eyes, letting her words sink into him. For years, he had thought himself forgotten, nothing more than dust in a broken colony. But now he understood his life had touched others, and that touch had grown into something larger than he could imagine. The ship lifted from the ground with a deep, powerful hum. The colony below grew smaller and smaller, the people tiny figures staring upward in awe. Some would never forget this day. They would tell their children, and their children's children, that a poor miner was carried away into the stars by beings of power. Not because he fought, not because he conquered, but because he showed kindness. As the ship soared into the sky, the younger sister leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "We told you we would return. Now we will never leave you again." Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he watched the stars draw closer. The life he had known faded behind him. A new life, vast and limitless, stretched before him, not as a miner, not as a forgotten man, but as the human whose kindness had changed the fate of others, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. The sisters stood beside him, their eyes shining with loyalty and warmth, and for the first time in many years, Daniel smiled. The ember he had kept in his chest for so long had finally become a flame that would burn across worlds, carrying his legacy wherever the stars would take him.